Good morning. This is the Innovation Conversation. How you doing, Tom?
Doing well, Kevin. Welcome to year 11 of the Innovation Conversation.
Absolutely. I'm just back from a wedding. You're in Las Vegas. You're at GroceryShop. We'll tell
Yes.
everybody right now the internet connection seems to be pretty good. Might get a little glitchy from moment to moment, but we'll cross our fingers.
Fingers crossed.
So, okay. Um, what are the big things you're seeing? I mean, open-ended question.
Yeah, it's probably not all that shocking. AI is a big theme here throughout everything. Um, AI for everything from retail media, which is still a very big theme. And in retail media, it is kind of media deployment, media targeting, the precision of such targeting, measurement of retail media. That's all, lots of AI and horsepower around that. You're seeing AI for sure being used in a lot of technology here around measuring and monitoring shelf conditions. So whether that be robots, whether that be done via phone, whether that be done via AR VR, there's a lot of that that we're seeing in play here. And even we heard late yesterday, and I'm actually going to a session put on by them today. Instacart and Advantage Solutions announced a collaboration around using the Instacart shoppers to capture shelf condition, and then having that shared with the execution teams from Advantage, to be able to kind of rectify and respond to the shelf conditions.
It's interesting where that is such a tangible, on the ground, basic kind of usage of AI, right? I mean, that
Yeah,
is, I mean, there's a lot of pie in the sky stuff out there. But that the grocery use case would seem, especially at store level or warehouse level or whatever you want to call it, would seem to be positive both for AI and also for just better logistics, better delivery on your value proposition, better customer satisfaction. It would seem to be basic in a way that some of the AI use cases you see are not.
yeah, I would agree with that. And obviously, in stock is it's always important to retailers. It's been I would say it's always a challenge, but it's always of the utmost importance because if you're not in stock, you can't sell it. And if you're not in stock, it's a bad customer experience. Looks terrible on the shelf. It just looks like you're not taking care of your merchandise, and it's just bad all around. Um, there's have been no shortage of tools available, for retailers and partners of retailers to be able to, measure um, and monitor that, right? I mean, everything from cycle counting in store to your DSD vendors are looking at the shelf and managing things to store walks and all that. But now with the capability of AI to be able to scan in some form or in any form, a shelf, recognize the images of those products, recognize what should be there, certainly recognize holes in what should be there, and then being able to kind of use AI underneath to identify that, surface it, using technology to route it to where it can be rectified. Again, a very practical use case. And I think for retailers, it's a great place to walk before you run. And, you're going to walk with a really good, for a really good reason with a really good outcome.
Yeah. It's also interesting to me, and you started to talk about this a minute ago, was if there is an overlap in terms of retail media, the retail media focus of the conference and the AI focus of the conference, that um, retail media, I mean, my skepticism about retail media has been well aired on Morning Newsbeat and on the innovation conversation. But if AI is actually doing the analytics on what's being delivered,
Hmm.
that could be problematic for retail media, right? They're going to have to up their game.
Yeah, I think it's problematic for like bad and poorly executed retail media. I think it's potentially really good for well executed retail media, right?
Right.
It's going to require retail media to be better. because you're not going to be able to hide, and say, oh, you got a 6x ROAS, you got this, you got that. A lot of the kind of traditional, measurements, I think, those blanket statements and those broad measurements um, are not necessarily going to fly. And, as we've said, we know that CPGs um, have constrained their budgets for, they've moved a bunch of money to retail media, no doubt about it. But, there's it's not a limitless pie, and their um, their ROI demands on this spend is incredibly high.
Yeah.
So you really do need to be performant. And if AI tools can help you, be better at planning, designing, targeting campaigns, and then ultimately measuring to show the output, that's a win.
Yeah.
I think ultimately that's a win. But yes, it definitely is a challenge for retail media broadly, but I think it's a good challenge.
Yeah. I saw that Ahold Delhaize, their retail media business has introduced something called Edge, which is a proprietary ad technology platform. What's that all about?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like they're creating a platform for retail media advertisers uh, to plan, make spends, run campaigns, and then run analysis on retail media spend. And they're touting it to be kind of for grocers by grocers. I think that's roughly what they said. And grocery is complicated. Lots of products, lots of retail media avenues, from site to app to in-store, through loyalty program and beyond. So, I think that there's probably some uniqueness to grocery, although I don't know that a mass merchant or even like a Best Buy or somebody that has it's a store-based omni-channel retailer. I don't know that it's that much different. And I'm not sure if their plan is to market this more broadly or if it is for Ahold Delhaize specifically. Clearly, it's starting there, but are they thinking this is something they could open up, potentially to other retailers to utilize or brands to be able to, manage their retail media spend across more than Ahold Delhaize? Because I think one thing brands don't need are more systems,
Right.
and more platforms through which to manage the retail media. They're already stretched pretty wide in doing that. So, we'll see where that goes. I know they seem pretty excited about
My Ahold Delhaize cynicism runs deep.
it.
And so I wouldn't be surprised if they thought that it made sense to market the Edge to other companies as a way of making money to make up for the fact that they have mediocre stores. But that's a different rabbit hole for another time. I'm curious. Let's circle back to AI for a second. There were
Yep.
two things that came up in the last day or two that really struck me. One, there was a report that Doug McMillon, CEO of Walmart, was at a workforce conference in Bentonville, and he said, this direct quote, AI will change literally every job in the world. And if there's a job it won't change, I haven't figured it out yet, which is I think we would probably both agree with that statement.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you think about like any job involves some combination of planning, giving or taking direction,
Right.
executing tasks, generating an outcome, measuring that outcome,
Right.
and then iterating and doing it again.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, whether you're collecting garbage or, building a spacecraft,
Yeah.
right? It's all it all entails that. So, I think AI does lend itself really well to supporting all of that.
Yeah.
But I still come down to you can't completely hand your brain over to the AI, right? We need to develop as humans um, in ways that we interact with AI and that AI helps us perform our tasks, our jobs, our meet our objectives, right? And it's kind of an exciting new skill set we need. Um, and so I wouldn't necessarily be scared by it or say, we're all going to become a bunch of robots or this thing's way overhyped. Let's figure out how to do it and let's be more effective.
Right.
If we can be more effective and be better at what we do, people are happier with our outcomes. And like, I think that's ultimately all a good thing.
Yeah. The other thing that popped up that was AI related was really interesting. That it was I was listening to the podcast with Scott Galloway and Kara Swisher, and they were talking about the fact that NVIDIA has announced that it's going to invest $100 billion with a B in OpenAI, and then the deal will allow OpenAI to use NVIDIA's AI semiconductors inside its data centers. So they're going to be able to both look at their investors and say, "See, look at all this new business we've got." But in fact, it is when we were talking about this before you and I came on the air, it was like, it's like they're, well, let's put it this way. Scott Galloway said, he goes, this is a signal that we're in a late stage bubble, that you can't justify your valuation. So you do these deals, which make you look like you're doing more business than you actually are. Another phrase would be Ponzi scheme, right?
Yeah.
And so, but I'm just curious. I mean, you're there, you're immersed in this, and in your day job, this is the kind of
Yeah.
stuff you're dealing with all the time. Do you have is it your sense that if we're not in a late stage bubble, that is it possible this whole AI thing, which by the way is driving so much of US economic growth at the moment, do you have any sense that we could even be approaching bubble territory?
I mean, I think you have to be concerned that a bubble is developing, or we are in one. I mean, it meets the criteria of all past bubbles, right? The amount of capital that's going in, the velocity of the acceleration of the size of the space, the increase in the space. So there's a lot of things that are bubble like. I don't know if you were to do the math on, okay, the increased market cap that's come from this, right? The increase in investment, the increase in market cap. Can that translate to improved P&Ls and improved value, right, across the space that these companies are serving, right, or the companies that are investing in and buying this tech? I think that's math. It shouldn't be that hard to do. We've probably been asking AI to do it. There's uh, there so if that does pencil out, then we're probably not in a bubble. If it doesn't pencil out, then I think we should be concerned. So I guess I would respond. So that's my general thought on that. But I would respond specifically to this value exchange, right, where NVIDIA says, "Hey, here's $100 billion. I'm going to invest in you and just spend it back with me, and I'll give you access to this capacity that I'm building, these products and capacity that I'm building, and then we both benefit from it." Like, there's some good in that because both companies do benefit from it, but it absolutely serves to pump up the value of both companies. But if OpenAI needs the capacity and NVIDIA's created the capacity, then it's a valid business transaction. But I totally get where Scott's coming from, that we could be creating a bit of a house of cards here.
Right.
That if any of those values are overstated, that we could be creating a house of cards. One thing I would say relative to our grocery industry, though, bubble or no bubble, AI capabilities that are becoming available to you as a grocer to run your business, to operate your supply chain, to run your back end systems, to operate your stores, to merchandise to your customers, to provide value to your customers, to execute for those customers.
Hmm.
You know, use it, and there's no bubble for us in the industry, right? Like, we got to try a lot of stuff. Ultimately, when we adopt things, we'll be able to adopt it based on a piloted, pro forma, proven ROI. So bubble or no bubble, don't let it spook you that like this thing might start really wobbling on us. Because as long
Yeah.
as you're working with sound companies, startups that have good funding, underneath them, where they're running multiple pilots or serving multiple customers, so you're not taking too much risk on any one individual, technology. And that's just a technology risk in general, right? That you take a risk on an early stage company, and then in their valiant efforts to serve you, they run out of their money, and then you're left having to find something new. That's a risk for retailers, but I don't think that risk is any higher now than it ever was. And I think that the technology is just so amazingly beneficial that you have to try it.
Yeah.
You got to put it to
Briefly,
work.
Yeah, briefly, just to move on for a
Mhm.
second. Any conversation about e-grocery? I'm just curious. Is there much conversation? I mean, e-grocery is something that continues to grow in percentage of business. It continues to thrive, I think, to the surprise of a lot of folks that yeah. So has there been much conversation about that?
Constant, yes. Discussion about e-grocery everywhere. Um, you've got some new delivery models. I think we've written about Buncha, but they're like a route, a scheduled route delivery system. Does like milkman runs. With kind of
Right.
fully loaded 8 to 10 delivery per hour trucks. Nice new model. You saw the news, which echoed through these halls yesterday. The news of Kroger focusing more on DoorDash.
Right.
Uh, Not necessarily even saying we're going to focus less on Instacart, but that was clearly the message the street received. Um, and then all of the on-demand delivery services are here: Shipt, Uber Eats, Grubhub, DoorDash, Instacart. They're all here, and it is very much a big topic of conversation. And folks realize that this is becoming a big part of our business, and it's growing.
Yeah.
And I think pretty typical that grocers here are approaching 15% of volume. In that is a key part of the overall equation, and that those shoppers that buy online and in store are your best shoppers. A lot of recognition of that. Uh, it's not speculative at all anymore. I mean, this industry definitely embraces.
Is there, last question. I'm always curious about this. As you're talking to people and you're visiting, I think you're right next door to the store of tomorrow
Yes.
installation. If I ask you, what is it, you have a sense of, or are you picking up on what a sense of what people think might be the next big thing? The thing that's around that is beyond AI, is beyond retail media networks, that 2, 3 years from now, that'll be the big focus at Grocery Shop.
I will say that for one of the first times ever, I don't really see what the next big thing is.
Right.
There's a bunch of stuff around like shelf sensors and using computer vision to assess, routing in store and effectiveness of different displays and media. And, there's a lot of kind of cool ways to use tech to be a sharper, better operator. Um, but I don't see any like, wow, this is going to completely disrupt where we are. Where we saw that with AI last year, I
Right.
think now you're seeing, well, we're doing it with AI now, and we know it's going to disrupt us,
Right.
and we know the store is going to change. And so there's there's a little less wondering about what's far out ahead, um, and a little more, you know, mapping out and starting to use
Yeah.
what's here today. Now, that's not to say that there aren't, a bunch of startups doing a bunch of really cool stuff here that, are going to be big this year, next year, and the year after. There's no shortage uh, of those companies. Um, and I think we are generally hearing from a lot of the tech providers. And I would say not a lot of new tech providers this year. There's, again, a bunch of startups coming up, but a lot of the tech providers here, are, they are, you're starting to see the 4, 5, 6 year old startup a lot more often now, that took a few years to get their footing, got into some retailer pilots. They're a couple years into a set of retailer pilots, kind of looking to take that next step. Um, a lot of lamenting at how slow retailers go. I like to say that retailers are deliberate. I want to make sure they get it right, and that's not necessarily bad. They could still be a little bit faster. Um, but yeah, not that like, wow, this thing's around the corner and it's going to completely change our lives. Not quite seeing that. But again, I think it's more the realization of the stuff we're starting to
Yeah.
experiment with now.
Yeah. I mean, there's deliberate and then glacial, right?
Yeah,
And the
I'd say
retailers
we're
that are being glacial, and we've talked about that here before,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, are the ones that are really going to create problems for themselves going forward. It's
Well,
interesting.
you would always say compete is a verb. I would say innovate is a verb.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep.
And I'll put into plug for something you and I are going to be doing the beginning of February. we're going to be at the National Grocers Association, and we with Michael Sandisolo are going to be doing the technology track, and we're going to have a presentation on what on quantum computing and
Nice.
and how that could be the next big thing that really affects marketers' ability to analyze and move on data just incredibly quickly. So,
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, in our thesis at Consumer Equity Partners, we are integral to our thesis are kind of three things: AI, tokenization, which is a whole other discussion for us to have,
okay.
and then quantum computing. And kind of in that order. Tokenization's here, but it's going to really start to become a big thing in the next couple of years. And then quantum is going to start, kind of behind that. And it's going to basically just absolutely supercharge everything we're doing with AI today.
Well, maybe tokenization is what we'll talk about in 2 weeks. When
I
we
love it.
when we next do our next innovation conversation. Either and we'll do a little add-on. We'll maybe sometime between now and then I'll say to ChatGPT, what do the Mets have to do for 2026? Like,
Tokenization's not going to help them.
nor will AI or quantum computing, but we can ask. Hey,
True.
listen, enjoy Vegas, the rest of your trip there. Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, everyone.
All right, brother. Take care.